Now, just to remind you all of how hot it's going to be, it could reach 32 apparently today and tomorrow. Certainly in the southeast of England, it will be warm for most of the country. This is what they say on what can only be described. I don't like to use the word mainstream. This is Sky News, right? That's what Europe looks like according to Sky News. Now, if you're not watching this, this is like a sort of a conglomeration of yellow, dark yellow, red, dark red. You know, it looks as though, for all intents and purposes, it's like the Ring of Fire. You know, and they talk about the tectonic plates of Europe going all the way down Italy, where they have occasional eruptions at Vesuvius and they have occasional earthquakes. There was an earthquake in Turkey yesterday. But it looks, for all the world, like the most dangerous planet. I mean, if you looked at that through a telescope, you know, crikey, is that Mars? Or is that, you know, one of those really, really hot countries next to the sun? Because it looks as though it's literally full of really dangerous gases. And, you know, if you lived there, surely you wouldn't last more than about 5 seconds because you'd be completely burned to a crisp. It's like a nuclear bomb's gone off. It's a nice day. It's the summer. Relax. Calm. Put some shorts on. Go and sit in a pub garden. See if they'll let you have a cigarette if you want. Obviously, we don't encourage smoking, but you know what I mean. It's really not that bad. Let's talk to Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism UK. Mark, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Good to be with you.
I mean, it does beg a belief the way that they get over the top with this stuff now, doesn't it? I mean, that looks to me like one of those pieces of film that you get from, you know, one of those really, really, really hot planets that you can't live on because it's ridiculously hot and you would vaporise as soon as you open the door.
Yeah, worse than that, Mike. I was trying to work out whether nuclear war had already broken out, or whether this was some sort of alien invasion, which had not been fully reported by the media.
Oh man, it's really bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's what did you say it's likely to be today in London and the South East?
About
32?
32 maybe. Yeah.
Glorious, glorious weather.
It was a beautiful weekend. You know, I had a lovely time. I was down at the beach with the dog both days, and you know, nothing to complain about at all. It was summer, for heaven's sake. Let's talk about some of the big stories in the papers this morning, though. Front page of the Daily Telegraph, away from the migrants, which has got plenty of coverage. Keir Starmer hid £30 billion cost of the Chagos surrender and actually misled Parliament. Labour ministers are now being accused of misleading Parliament. This is quite a serious story.
It is a very serious story. All sorts of numbers have been batted around on how much this surrender of the Chagos Islands was going to cost. And the Telegraph now say that they've come across government documents suggesting that Keir Starmer, surprise, surprise, has understated the cost by a factor of 10. I mean, it's a scandal either way, isn't it, Mike? Because the idea that we would pay money to give away sovereign and strategically important territory is absurd. You would have thought it would be us receiving a ton of money, not giving away a single penny. But it looks like some sort of accountancy trick played by Keir Starmer, and how inflation is calculated and the rest of it means that the cost is likely to be nearer 35 billion than I think it's 3.4 billion that he claimed. The Conservatives were claiming it would cost 30 billion, and they were sort of laughed at by the government. It looks like it's going to be even higher than that.
Well, that is the thing. I mean, look, we've got a clip here of what he said, because as ever with Keir Starmer, he's always so kind of dismissive of any kind of criticism, and but he's almost sneering about it. Have a look at this.
This cost is part and parcel of using Britain's global reach to keep us safe at home. And it will be less than the cost of running one aircraft carrier for a year. Today's agreement is the only way to maintain the base in the long term.
Yeah, except that wasn't true. And if he knew it wasn't true, I would say that is an incredibly serious thing to have said.
Yes, I agree with that. I mean, what we're seeing here is the true cost, and indeed, Mike, the idiocy of Keir Starmer's ludicrously slavish commitment to anything that even smells like international law.
Yeah.
So if some sort of international court somewhere, probably a fairly tin pot court, sort of slightly suggests that maybe in the due course of time the UK should surrender its claims to the Chagos Islands, then Keir Starmer and his mate, the Attorney General, leap on this immediately and say this has got to be done forthwith, it's got to be complied with yesterday. It was ludicrous. If you want to ensure that Britain is safe, we should have kept that territory and taken a much more cynical approach to international law judgments. There's nobody to hand it back to. It's been given away despite the protestations of the Chagossians, it makes Britain's strategic defence position weaker, not stronger, and we're paying for the privilege. Look, if it was a trade-off that Mauritius had given us £35 billion, well, you might say, well, on the one hand, we're losing sovereignty over this site, but on the other hand, we've got a whole shed load of money coming in. But it's both. It's a double whammy. We're surrendering it and paying for the privilege of surrendering it. The lunacy of our, or at least Keir Starmer's addiction to international law in all of its weird forms is exposed brutally here.
Yes, as is indeed his complete and utter inability to negotiate anything. You know, everything that he negotiates seems to end up being a worse deal for this country than it was before. You know, in the same way that he's now negotiating with the European Union for a reset, as it's being rather euphemistically called. But what so far has happened is that we're going to be tying ourselves to their food standards laws, which are going to cost our farmers money. We're tying ourselves to a new fishing treaty, which is going to cost our fishermen money. We're going to find ourselves having some kind of carbon emissions tax because we're aligning ourselves with them on carbon as well. So, you know, and even the US trade deal and the Indian trade deal, both of which had, you know, worse outcomes for us than it did for them.
Yeah. You get the impression the Prime Minister doesn't much like Britain, don't you, Mike? Or at least doesn't trust its institutions.
Well, he keeps trying to change it as well.
Yeah, exactly right. And I mean, I think it was a few years ago in an interview he was asked, was he more a Westminster man or a Davos man?
Yeah.
Did he prefer Westminster to Davos, the gathering of the international corporate and political elite? And he didn't blink before saying Davos.
Yeah.
So it's unsurprising if you've got a Prime Minister who, at best, is sceptical about Britain running its own affairs and, at worst, is hostile to Britain running its own affairs, that every negotiation isn't really a negotiation, a sort of tough, across-the-table, real firm arm wrestle. It's a surrender.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing in more or less each and every one of this government's interactions internationally. It's a tragedy. And it's going to be bad for Britain over the long term, not just our defence interests, which I believe are harmed by us having less control over the Diego Garcia base on the Chagos Islands, but also in our economic interests. You just highlighted there a whole bunch of new regulations which are going to come in. I mean, you would think that the UK was under-regulated, awash with cash, and the government had tons of money to fritter away by the way this government's behaving. Well, I'm afraid the opposite is true. We're already too highly regulated without the EU trying to impose more red tape on us. We are broke. We are getting broker by the day because whatever the black hole was that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves inherited from the Conservatives, they've kept digging and that black hole is bigger.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid, Mike, everything's going to get a lot worse before it starts getting better.
Well, it really is. I mean, we discovered, I think, at the back end of last week, did we not, that a £22 billion black hole, which never really existed, which they said was the cause of all sorts of problems for them because the Tories left it for them, has now ballooned to 50 billion. But they don't say that bit's our fault. They just kind of go, it's magically turned up into a £50 billion black hole. But now with Chagos, you know, presumably that means it's 85 billion.
Yeah, I guess if you accounted for all of the Chagos deal this year, I suppose they could spread it out over a longer period of time. But they, on the economy, Mike, I mean, they're finding to their cost, but I think to nobody else's surprise, that if your solution to everything is just to dial up tax, two things happen. Firstly, people respond differently once their tax rates change. They might retire early or not strive for promotion, or if you're hitting the rich very hard, you might leave the country. In fact, millionaires are fleeing Britain at a faster rate than virtually any other country in the world. So they've dialed up tax without getting any revenue in. They don't have any real plans or can't pilot through any way of saving any money. I mean, this is only a few weeks ago, of course, that their attempt to save what basically amounts to pennies in the pound on welfare was blocked entirely by their backbenchers. So the welfare bill, if anything's going to go higher. And then they have a whole range of weird and wonderful things like surrendering the Chagos Islands that they want to fritter away billions on. So this, I'm afraid, is the road to ruin. We've got to have a big conversation about how we're going to reset Britain. I think we've got to restore a lot of our institutions. We've got to be a lot tougher with the international community rather than bowing down to it. And we're going to have to find some pretty serious savings in terms of public expenditure. if we don't do that, we're on a one-way track to being the 2025 equivalent of Greece. We will go bust.
Yeah, exactly right. Although even Greece seems to have managed to get a handle on how to deal with illegal migrants better than we have. There's a story in the Sun today from Crete.
That's a low bar, Mike.
Yeah, well, true. Where they've actually managed to reduce the number of boats arriving on our Crete shores to zero. Basically because they said, look, if you arrive here from North Africa, we will arrest you, we will detain you, and we will send you back. You will not ever become somebody who can have asylum in Greece at all, I'm afraid. And so they've stopped coming and they've started going somewhere else. But just when you thought I was going to give you some good news, I'm afraid, Mark, I've got some further bad news for you on this in the running of Britain. Front page of the Daily Mail, 26,000 prisoners freed early by Labour. So since they've been in charge, they've literally released hundreds of people every single week, to the point where 26,000 have now been walking the streets, including hundreds of serious offenders who were handed sentences of more than a decade behind bars. An extraordinary figure.
It is extraordinary, and what I'm trying to get to the bottom of is what obligate are these people just now free to, mingle in society again?
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you are going to release people early, it needs to be under very strict provision. I don't know, an ankle bracelet, and you can't leave your house or some such like. And the justice system, yet another part of Britain that's completely broken. Violent offenders released early, but if you say something a bit off colour on Twitter, expect a knock on your door by PC Plod, and if it's really off colour, expect to face a long jail term yourself. We seem to be sending the wrong people to prison and releasing the wrong people way too early. So public faith, I think, is, we were hearing just before the news, Mike, about the protests that ordinary people are now making, ordinary women and children outside migrant hotels. The British public, I think, have now had it right up to here. They've had more than enough of this. They realise the system is broken. They're pleading for some big changes to get our justice system back on track, our immigration system back on track. I mean, Mike, you mentioned Greece as a comparator. A friend of mine was talking to a former Greek immigration minister. They are really tough if you turn up at Greece and try and pull the wool over their eyes. If you say that you've come from this particular city or this particular town, or you're persecuted for this particular reason, you are very seriously cross-examined. Here, we take everything on faith. Not only do we take it on faith, we then give you a hotel room. And as you were saying earlier, Mike, what's covered on the front page of The Sun, you don't just get a hotel room, you can get some sort of days out at the football or tickets to the cinema or all the rest of it. We've got to completely change the way we do business, both in terms of justice and immigration. People out there in the real world are completely aware the system is absolutely broken. And our politicians, I'm afraid, don't seem to have the first clue about how to fix it.
No, they really don't. And I'm afraid that's a rather unfortunate place to end, but that's what we're going to do. Mark, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism UK.